Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's biggest and longest running show. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman, and today we've got a great show for you. Over the last few years, I've watched a lot of optometric practice owners venture into aesthetics. They get an IPL or RF device for something for dry eye, and they kind of realize that it can have some additional benefits, and then they start dabbling with aesthetics. And most of them just kind of stay dabbling with it, and it doesn't really turn into a business. But today's episode is about someone who made it into a real business and did aesthetics right. My guest is Dr. Amanda Barker, and she has taken what became an adjacent opportunity inside her very successful optometry practice, and she's built it into a completely separate business, generating over $1 million per year with significant room to grow. And this is not about casually adding a couple laser treatments to the schedule where there happens to be an opening. Amanda has actually taken and she tells you what the finished product really looks like, and created a real business. It's a separate location. It's got licensed providers, multiple treatment rooms, consultative sales process, carefully layered technology, production goals, patient retention systems, and a long-term plan for each patient. And all of this didn't come overnight, right? So she tells you her journey of starting an adjacent business because she bought an RF and an IPL device, starting an adjacent business kind of inside of her optometric practice. And then this year, 8 years later, graduating into a separate location because it was so successful. So we talk about all kinds of things, including what it cost to do some of the stuff, some of the mistakes that she made early, the things that she learned, and some of the things you should be skeptical about that are going on in the industry. And how, and then we also talk about some numbers, like what's a properly equipped treatment room? How much can it generate per day? Right? And she gives some really, really interesting numbers. So on the other side of the economics, we talk about what her patients spend, what can margins look like? How does she evaluate each device before purchasing it? Where's the real opportunity? Because it's not a single procedure, it's building a multi-year patient journey. And how does she do that? So can you be an optometrist who builds a multi-million-dollar aesthetics practice? Absolutely. But as Amanda makes it very, very clear, you have to treat it like a real business. And she talks us through exactly what she does. As always, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And if you have questions, ideas, feedback, please reach out to me directly at eugeneshatsman.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the Eye Care Boss book, now available on Amazon. And now, here's today's Power Hour with Dr. Amanda Barker. All right, Dr. Amanda Barker, welcome to the Power Hour. So excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so give everybody a little bit of background on your practice and your journey as an eye care provider.
Yeah, sure. So my husband is also an OD, and we opened our first practice in 2004. So we've had that practice for quite some time, and it is now operationally 3 doctors a day in the Charlotte area. We have 2 other locations, a fully VT location and then a second primary care location at this point. We have 7 doctors, and our primary location generates about 5.5 to 6 million a year. So 3 locations currently in the Charlotte area.
Yeah. And the fourth one that you're not really talking about is the topic of the show today, which is aesthetics. And the reason I wanted to talk with you about it is that I've had kind of a front row seat to your aesthetics journey from the very beginning when you were like, I think I might want to do this. And as we've known each other over the years, I've watched you go through different phases of growth and sideline and growth and sideline. And I find that aesthetics is an interesting enough topic to a lot of people because it feels so nicely adjacent, right? Everybody who buys an IPL is definitely asking themselves the question of, well, should I be like offering aesthetics? And should I be like, marketing something from an aesthetic standpoint to my patients? And I don't know if that's exactly how you got started. So maybe we'll start there. Is what made you decide, and kind of what was the thing that tipped you in the direction of you want to offer aesthetic services to your patients?
Sure. So, like probably many other ODs across the country, I learned about the alternative dry eye solutions or treatments back in maybe around 2015, 2016. At that point, we were utilizing drops and plugs and Restasis and whatever we had on the market. And then, of course, radio frequency and IPL started to emerge as an alternative. And we initially bought the temperature envy radio frequency device for dry eye because that was really one of the only things that was available at that point in time, and started to utilize that for our dry eye treatments. That quickly led to acquiring an IPL. We started to learn through different opportunities for training across the country how to utilize those together, and that just became part of our what we called dry eye spa within the practice. And then naturally, having the devices, I started to research what they would, how they would perform, what treatments they were used for in other industries. Of course, aesthetics was where they were originally used. So I quickly, of course, wanted to figure out how I can use those. And that journey is what kind of led me more down the path of aesthetics. It's a very different path than just dry eye. So I started to do research to see how to use those devices specifically, and that really started me on a journey in around 2016.
So was it the what was the thing that made you decide, okay, I'm going to offer this service? Was it that you tried it with a few patients and you got really good results, or was it that you were just like, hey, I think I can build a real business around this because, and I already have the tools? Like, what was the biggest motivating factor for you?
And you're specifically asking about aesthetics or dry eye?
Aesthetics
Okay,
for sure.
that's what yeah, for sure. Well, so what I it was a little more of a rocky path in the beginning because what I learned quickly was the devices would perform treatments that would fall outside in certain states of my licensure as an OD. So while I wanted to offer these treatments and I started to go to trainings to learn how to do these treatments and how they would work in the outcomes, I also learned what we're regulated with in our state and specifically on how I could run the devices. So it kind of diverted into a parallel path of learning what the devices would do and seeing that and loving it and wanting them myself and wanting to be able to offer them. And then also understanding the boards, the licensure, the laws within each individual state and mine in particular and how that would work. So it took a little time to work through.
So what were the barriers that you ran up against? It is like what are you specifically in your state? What are you specifically allowed and not allowed to do? And also, what did you want to do?
Well, I wanted to do everything that the devices would allow me to do, but because I was intrigued, I thought it was fun. I saw a demand for it within my community and beyond, so that was something that I was really interested in. The what I learned, and I think this is going to vary across every state, is that within my state in particular, under my licensure and regulation by my board, I was allowed to do certain treatments that were linked directly to diagnosis codes within my profession. So I quickly found that the structure within my primary care practice was not going to allow me to do aesthetic treatments. That's not managed by our board, and I'm not licensed to carry out those treatments beyond the eye and adnexa. So that led me on a different path to figuring out how it could be a part of something bigger and different. And I don't personally run any of the devices or offer any of the services. That was never my goal with the aesthetic practice. So
Yeah, and
within
I
the
think,
practice.
and it's fair to say that you're one of the that your entire approach to your businesses has always been business minded. And what I mean by that is that you're never looking to just sell more of your time to patients. You've always been trying to figure out, how do I turn this into a business that grows and scales and I don't have to do all the procedures myself, which I think is really wise. So let's just talk about this journey. So once you figured out that you had some regulatory issues you had to get around. What did you do? What was the next step?
So after seeking out, legal advice and developing a structure for the practice, then as you said, it was never my desire to be in the clinic running the devices and doing the treatments. That just was not the path that I was on. I love the business side of things and the entrepreneurial side. Not that I don't love patient care, I do, but so I immediately started to hire great providers to offer the services, and that included licensed estheticians with a history of certifications and training in the procedures that we wanted to do, along with nurse practitioners that would continue to expand, to be honest. But we slowly started to add injectables and other devices that would be delegated accordingly to the licensure of the individual. So we've had RNs, nurse practitioners, licensed estheticians, and medical assistants within the medical spa for aesthetics.
Got it. And it was like, so I think it sounds like first part was you had to open a separate business, the med spa.
I did. I did.
Right. So then the med spa in itself was separate from your eye care clinic, and and physically, we'll talk about cross marketing in a second. But then you started employing people part time. Are they all part timers? Are they full time?
So that's a great question. So we started this in, I think, 2018 is when we officially started down the path of having a separate business structure altogether. And so over that time, I have one full time at this point. I should move back to say, originally it was carved out as a sublet portion of my eye care clinic. And so we were limited by space and some operational constraints within that setting. So only within the last year have we moved out into a location where we can really expand. But I currently have only one full-time licensed esthetician, and then soon I will have nurse practitioners every day of the week. We've had coverage with a nurse practitioner 3 days a week at this point, and we just have slowly grown as the business has grown. So,
Got it. So when you started, when you decided to jump into this, like, hey, both feet, I'm running it. Okay. So that motivator, it sounds like there were three maybe things, and I want you to talk about each of them. One
okay,
was the business opportunity.
yes,
One, it sounds like, was just the availability of the devices. Like you had already made the investment. Let's use the technology you just spent a ton of money on to its fullest potential.
hmm
And one might have been patient feedback and patient efficacy. So talk
sure,
about all three of those. Like, what did you see as the business opportunity? I mean, obviously you had some devices, but what else did you have to buy in order to open a med spa,
yeah.
or what did you have to add? And number three is like, what were the patient feedback points early on that like encouraged you to keep going, and you were like, oh yeah, this is good. This is a good idea.
Okay. I think I'll remember all three. I'm going to start backwards. The patient feedback has always been a real driver. In fact, we're doing that now. We are now adding uh, hormone replacement therapy and weight optimization within our spa because of patient feedback, along with more ablative technologies. So that's always been something that we've used to know what's the next thing to buy and how is the next way to grow. The second, I guess, point is also just being able to invest in great providers that understand. And in my case, I want people who want to grow within the practice. They want to develop their own areas of focus and develop a patient base. And that's really important for the model that I'm building. Um, so in the beginning, one thing I guess to be aware of is that it is not an inexpensive journey to take this route. And there's a million different reps and a million different companies. And I think if I were to go back and start again, I would start to research what is aesthetics, understand all the layers of the skin, understand where each item treats, and really build a portfolio of what exactly I want, because I kind of just was making decisions more from an OD dry eye standpoint in the beginning, and I would have made some different decisions now if I had known where I was going to end up. I don't know if that answered the first
Well,
question, but
for example, actually, that's a really good that's a really good point that I want to zoom in on. So, what are
okay.
some examples of things that, knowing what you know now, what 8 years later, what are
Mhm.
some things that you would have definitely done from the beginning that you didn't?
Yes. So for aesthetics, what I would have done from the beginning is I would have probably purchased devices to layer together, only a couple devices to layer together to get a more immediate outcome aesthetically with a patient when you layer those together along with injectables. I
Are
would
you
have
talking
started
about
out
like
that way.
microneedling, or like
Yes.
what are you talking about?
So, over the path or this journey, what I've learned is, there's no one device that does every single thing. And patients come in and they want all sorts of different things. And of course, they want what's the best thing to do it all. Well, there's nothing that does it all. Injectables do one thing. Tox addresses your wrinkles. It doesn't do anything to pores or skin texture or tightening or lifting. And microneedling is deeper. And if it's with radio frequency, it's one outcome. If it's just microneedling, it's different and it targets a different layer of the skin. It's really fascinating. So you could be microneedling and you'll get certain results. It's not going to stop the wrinkles and it's not going to resurface your skin to make the skin look beautiful. It will to some degree. So what I would have educated myself better on from the beginning is understanding what each of the devices do in what layers and what the outcomes are, to buy smarter, to overlap those two to get the outcomes you want, because the outcomes is what drives the patient. Our in our OD practice or our regular eye care practice, the number one way that we've grown for 20 years is word of mouth, right? People come, they have an experience, and they refer other people. Well, the number one way to grow in aesthetics is that people tell people why their skin looks so good. And so you want them to leave and get an somewhat of an instant result as quickly as you can. So microneedling, just to give you a sense of that, the radio frequency microneedling, it takes up to 2 to 3 months after a series of those to get the full effects, and they're beautiful. But people want something now. So I've learned that now, if you layer that with something else pretty quickly, they're going to get some instant gratification, and then they're going to get the full results over time. I would have
What's the
just said,
now?
what's
What's the thing that you give them for the
now?
now?
Well, now I think doing something that addresses the surface and the texture and the more of a either a non-ablative or ablative, more surface treatment, whether that depending on the practice and the state and who you have working within your practices. I think anything from doing some pills all the way up to CO2 lasers, those give people some more instant results with how the skin looks. And then, of course, toxins give you, reduction in wrinkles really quickly. So those two things give people that, oh, in a few days to a week, I'm seeing some serious results, and then buys you some time on the deeper treatments that take longer to get the results, but are really beautiful and natural um, results or natural looking results. And that's another thing that I think you didn't ask, but aligning your aesthetics clinic with like what is the outcome you're going for. And ours has been a very natural anti-aging approach. Like, what can we do? Our hope is that people come in and they leave and they feel great, and no one really knows that they came, because it's a really natural result as people, in the journey over time.
Yeah. So, Amanda, as you're as you were saying, I think, I'm sure some listeners are trying to do the math.
Yes,
So, in terms of, in addition to the RF IPL stuff that you had for dry eye,
correct.
what did you buy, or how much did you spend? Let's just say, a ballpark, how much did you spend on other stuff, equipment, or technology for your med spa in order to be able to offer this full service experience that you're describing?
Well, to this point, and this is over a period of time, like adding one device at a time and rolling out the services. I've probably spent 800 to a million. I mean,
Okay.
it's not a it's not a small investment, but
No, but
that's
that's
some of,
we're going to talk about your revenue in a second. I just want people to realize what it means to have like a serious med spa business that's in
yes,
line, that's side by side. But this is over 8 years that
this is
spent this.
for
Um,
sure.
and I think when we get to revenues and patient volume,
Yeah,
we'll probably people will realize that hey, what I know about you is that you're a very smart business person. So I don't think you would have spent that money if that wasn't coming back to you tenfold.
right.
So let's talk about uh, before we get to all the economics of all this stuff.
Mhm.
I want to talk about how like again you started this med spa. It is separate from your from your eye care practice, and of course at this point you've got now like an employee of that thing. So the meter's
Yeah,
running, right?
you're
So
right.
what did you do to get your first sort of batch of patients for the med spa?
Well, I was fortunate enough to start off the med spa as a small business within a business. So, because we carved out originally back in 2018, we carved out an area within our clinic for the spa. It was a really a natural option for people to kind of migrate over to see what we're doing next. And so we had that foot traffic while we were within the practice in the past. And that was valuable because we could, market to those patients originally. We are completely separated now in a freestanding building. But at that point, people were interested. They were coming in for their eye care. It was natural as they walked by to see, well, what are you doing? And at that point, we did our dry eye treatments within the area, the same area. So that was a great way to get started. And naturally, people that were already coming to see us as we moved came to see us there. And then we have continued to do separate marketing efforts as more devices have come on. And it's just like with any other business, though. There's a learning curve and there is a ramp up period. Obviously, there was also a ramp up to my knowledge, having been in the eye care industry for so long. There were some things that crossed over and were really similar, but I had to learn a tremendous amount about the technologies, what they do, why we would use them. And I started with really zero knowledge.
Yeah, so I think that one of the questions I have, from as you're thinking about like, okay, I'm recruiting patients from my eye care practice, is like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you explain this? How do you what are the how do you make the patient understand that there's a link between their eye doctor and now some sort of aesthetic service component?
Right. Well, I mean, that's a great question. So I think that there's lots of people, men and women, that are already looking and researching for these treatments. It's not like they aren't. And I think that if you are already within an industry and you have a reputation for providing a great service, they're interested in hearing what you're doing and why. And our story was exactly what I told. We bought these devices. They are treating dry eye, and they do all these other things, which we started to learn about and loved. So now we're just expanding those services to our patients. And we really, in the beginning, only expanded them to our internal patients because of where our learning curve was. I would, as a where I am now in the profession, and I look back at that, I think, well, I mean, I could have been much more aggressive with marketing. I could have probably learned faster, but I was doing so many things. So I don't know that that's the right path for everybody, but for me, I wanted to have a good grasp. So we started slow and built our confidence. I got great providers, and we've just taken one step at a time.
And so it sounds like you were pretty honest with your patients to say, oh, it's almost like, and I don't know, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I also don't remember this exact marketing campaign, but
Yes, yes,
I believe you were pretty transparent with patients in saying, like we've discovered that our dry eye, that the devices that deliver a lot of value for our dry eye patients also have this convenient side effect of of aesthetic treatment. So we're expanding into aesthetic services, and
Yeah.
we're looking for patients to test out some of these devices. And like initially, did you do it like at a low rate to get the reps and to get the goodwill, or did you
Yes.
set like I know the industry. I know this for a fact. Like all the reps want you to set the highest price up front because they don't want to be they basically want certain market prices for certain procedures.
For sure.
But what was your approach in the beginning?
So we did several different things, and we had some evening community events where we invited patients, along with some marketing in the community, where we would have people come in for an evening, and we would run the devices on models, so patients could see, like, this is how it feels, this is what we're doing, this is what the expected outcomes are. And we just did educational events, and then offered VIP pricing. Right. So you're right. You don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face and start really low on your fees. In fact, I wouldn't even at this point encourage that. I would encourage to set them what where they should be, and then offer packages, offer VIP pricing, and certain deals to people who adopt early. And because it's, as you know, just like in the eye care world, if you start with your prices too low, it's really hard to justify why you're increasing them. If you start with the prices where they should be and offer package deals or combo deals and that sort of thing, it's a much better way to go, in my opinion. But we did all sorts of things like that, and we just organically grew. I mean, people know I hired a licensed esthetician, and she did everything within her licensure at that point. I got a salon. Originally, I got a salon certification, and she did, all the things that she could do. And so people wanted um, uh, facials and hydrofacials and all those sorts of things. And then we started to just get more serious and add more serious treatments. And by serious, I mean getting to a point to bring on an injectable and nurse practitioner. And that was a game changer for us. I think that's just a key piece for growing if you're moving in that direction.
Yeah. Amanda, right now, when somebody walks into or when somebody comes into your aesthetics practice,
Mm-hmm.
what is the experience like? Just describe what you've built because I know you just recently built out like a separate location for it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so describe what you've built, describe the experience, and then also describe like what your sales process is like. How do you guys do it? Because and one of the things I want to point out for the audience is that when you're moving from eye care, like, and this is my experience as a marketer, when you're moving from eye care to aesthetics,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of patients. So the most common keyword in the eye care industry is eye doctor, optometrist, that kind of thing, right? The most common keyword in the aesthetics industry, which oftentimes also represents a patient's lack of awareness about, everything that they need, is Botox. Botox near me is
Mm-hmm.
some sort of injectable, the name of an injectable that people think they need, and they're like hard unit shopping. They're like hard price shopping. When they call you, they say, "What is the price for a unit of Botox?" And
Yes.
the med spa that sucks is going to be like, "It is whatever it is, $14, and and we'd be happy to see you next Tuesday," right?
Yes.
Versus somebody who is who's really educated at sales will do something different. So I want to hear your approach and what you guys have learned over the years as you talk about the experience. So like start with the experience and the practice that you've built out. And really, I want the audience to kind of picture that if you're going to get serious about this business, this is the outcome that you're really looking for, at least, whatever 8 steps in.
Okay. Well, I should probably add a disclaimer that I am still developing that journey, and I'm still learning every day, which I think is part of the key, right? Like, to learn as you go, and make changes to get better. I think the first few things that I would encourage people to do is just to think long term about what the face of the practice looks like, and who is the patient base that you're going after. And for me, that was really easy because I used a similar philosophy to our practice, which I think worked well for us and was successful for us. And that meant developing a relationship with patients over their lifetime and it being a patient journey with us, not today selling you the most expensive pair of glasses that or making the sale necessarily today. It was developing relationships and hoping that I would see people grow old with us and their children and so on. And that and doing what is right and offering a high level service and product. So I just took that philosophy and replicated it in the spa, and that's working well for us. So we're not competing with Groupon for talks. We're developing a patient journey. So when you come into the practice, you do a consultation and what's called a good faith exam, and that means we're evaluating what your goals are, and also educating you on what we have to offer, and then in conjunction with your goals, developing a patient journey or a plan, utilizing all the devices. Because remember, IPL is amazing and it'll do an amazing thing, but it just does one or two things. And so, really understanding what you hear the patient saying and trying to meet their goals by developing a plan. So, that's been a really key part of us, the aesthetic consultation, developing a patient journey, helping them to get to their first goal, but also realizing like the aging process continues on. And so you're not going to come in and get 3 micro needlings and look 20 if that's your goal. Really, it's unrealistic. I think, I mean, we don't say it, of course, in that way, but the fact is we're developing consultative plans and educating our patients and then starting from there. And usually that includes doing more than just talks.
Yeah. So what that and again, I think this is such a wise approach. I think it is a fool's errand to think that you have an optometry practice and then adjacent you can just be like, well, listen, 3 treatments of IPL and on your skin are going to cost this much money. You can sign up over there if you'd like, right? Rather
Right.
than that, you're saying, let's treat it as a separate business. Let's give it its own sales process. Let's give it its own sort of experience and feel and I imagine it's very spa like when you walk in, and at the same time, you're probably still doing a bunch of cross marketing to your eye care patients in order to get them there. So, have you ever? I mean, I heard you say you did the community nights to
Right.
essentially like, here's, hey, eye care patients, we got this cool thing. Come in, check it out, test it out, whatever. Like, what's your best source of patients right now outside of referrals? And are you still utilizing your eye care list, so to speak, to drive patients into the spa, or has it gone beyond that?
So it's gone beyond that now because we really completely separated the practices. So, with the way that you market and the newsletters and blogs and all the things that we're doing within the spa, unless somebody elects to get all of that, we no longer mix those two patient bases. Although we're very close and people know who we are, so they naturally know that in the aesthetics I'm involved there and I'm an eye doctor, but there's lots of other people involved there too. So we now are marketing in different ways, and obviously online tools are drive the most, um, I guess, referrals, making sure people are searching. So understanding what people are searching for is, I think, a key component. And then word of mouth, like the people that come in that are happy, they refer their friends. That's still the number one referral source for us at this point.
Do you guys
Is
have membership plans?
we have we are in the process of developing it. We've not been as successful with that, but yes, we do, and we're really launching that in the fall with our new hormone replacement therapy programs and weight optimization programs. So I think that'll be a natural blend. I've been partly a slower adopter to that. I think it'll be very successful, but because it's something again new to me, I probably have adopted that slower than I should have.
Okay. After the break, we're going to jump into the economics of this. I want to know what
Sure.
patient spend. I want to know what this thing makes you and whether it's really worth the investment as our listeners are sitting here and thinking, man, do I want to get serious about aesthetics? We'll be right back on the Power Hour. Hey there, it's Eugene, and I want to let you in on something. So, you've been to conferences before, you've come home fired up, and then Monday morning hits and it's back to the grind. The ideas don't stick, the plan never gets made, and 6 months later, your practice is in the same place. So, I know that pain. I've been to those conferences with you, and that is not happening at this new event called I Care Boss Live. You've heard the story of I Care Boss, and now there's an event, I Care Boss Live. It's September 16th through 18th in Cleveland, 2.5 days. We're bringing together 200 of the best practice owners in eye care for a one of a kind event that combines speakers, peer learning, mastermind groups, and industry innovation, all designed around one goal. You leave with a 90-day plan and you can actually execute it and get stuff done. And we're going to tackle some real stuff: exam only rates, revenue per patient, people problems, leadership, AI and technology, specialty growth, the things that keep people up at night. We're going after it. And we're doing it in a room full of practice owners that are just as serious about growth as you are. This is not a conference. It's not a seminar. It's something different. There are only 200 spots. So if you want to be in on this, this is not publicly announced, just on this podcast. Go to thepowerpractice.com, click events, click apply now. This is invite only. It's not for everybody. So you have to apply. We'll ask you a few questions. And if it's a fit, we'll invite you to register. This event, I Care Boss Live, is going to sell out. Do not sit on it. I invite you to apply right now. All right, we're back on the Power Hour. I've got Dr. Amanda Barker with me, and we are talking now the economics of opening an aesthetics practice and doing it right, and what was born out of an adjacency to your optometric care practice is now a standalone business. Let's start at the punchline right now, and then work backwards. So, what's total revenue? What are you on track for this year?
So for this year, we're on track for somewhere between 1 million and 1.2.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations. That's so awesome. And like, now let's dissect that a little bit.
Okay.
What is your, and I don't know how you, so in eye care, revenue per patient
Yes.
is like, it's a little bit easier to measure because so much of that revenue oftentimes happens in a single transaction, and a smaller percent of patients are coming back and back and back again unless you really are running a specialty practice. So um, I don't know if I would say revenue per patient, or maybe I would say revenue per patient per year is like a is a how do you measure that?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I'm such a numbers person, so I think you could dissect it a lot of different ways. I think if you start with just general KPIs, you can think about it in a really similar fashion to a regular eye care practice. I mean, you're going to break down your overall revenue and I guess budgeting into similar buckets. You have your overhead, you have your cost of goods, you have your staff, and of course, yeah, you're always looking for your EBITDA or your profit, I guess is what you'll call it. So I use very similar budgeting goals in the med spa, meaning, staffing is 20 to 25%, and cost of goods is higher, but you have to remember that there's no insurance. So like typically what you charge is what you get. You don't take a loss of 20 or 25% on fees and that sort of thing. So there are definitely some differences, but I follow a real similar structure that I followed in the eye care practice with where I feel like different expenses should line up.
And this is
Knowing
the
that,
cost of goods thing, which is like, I want to pause on that because you brought that up for a second. Like, I
mhm,
imagine that there is a high cost of goods for the consumables that everybody knows, Botox filler, that kind of stuff, or toxin filler. I shouldn't say Botox,
right.
toxin filler. And then there is a really low cost of goods, I imagine, on like machines, right? On procedures, lasers, and such. And so I am curious, like, how do you balance that? Because I think toxin fillers, like it's kind of expensive to operate, and I've heard practices lose money on toxin filler just so that they can make money on the machines.
Yes, for sure. And we could speak an hour just on this topic, actually, Eugene. But well, the first thing to know is that there's, a significant upfront cost, which knowing what you want and understanding what you want and what you want to offer upfront is super important, and arming yourself with that information. Because every single rep with every single company will come in and tell you that if you buy this device and you roll it in, you're going to make a $500,000. And so you've got to have the wisdom and understanding that there's far more that goes into it than just rolling the device into your clinic, which means you must have very knowledgeable providers who know how to use the product and get good results. And that's another piece that was very foreign to me in the beginning. So I've gone through training with all of my staff, our staff. I've done all the trainings that they do just so I understand and I can develop marketing plans around them. To your point, I think that it goes back to a philosophy for your business. I The devices, although have a lower consumable cost, have a much higher upfront cost. So if you're having to finance them, you have to keep that in mind. So there's a cost to turning that device on. There's also a cost if you're turning the device on and you don't have a well-trained person with great outcomes, because then you start to lose, the momentum of utilizing that device over and over again. I tend to not follow the whole take a loss on injectables. The injectables drive our business. So I want good results and, a cycle of that patient coming in and they're happy with their results, because they're only going to last for so long. You know that Botox is going to last on average 3 to 4 months. So having someone that understands, is well trained, knows how many units to dose, and that we don't necessarily apologize for our pricing. Some people will go and shop, but that's not really the patient base that we're going after, because we want them to cross between all of our practitioners. We want the tox patients to also be getting pills, because that just improves their overall outcome. And it goes back to the consultation and developing a plan. So then when you were asking me about per patient revenue, I think you can think about it in two different ways. You can look at who are your VIP patients over a span of a year, the people that are on a journey to just continue aging naturally and utilizing the devices with what fits into their lifestyle and budget. But we do go as far as, with every provider, breaking down your time in your room. Like, what is your goal? If you're an esthetician, you're an RN, you're an NP. Obviously, they all have different delegations, can do different things. But we look at, like, what is the maximum production per hour, based on, where we want to be as a business and where you want to be as a provider, because you know their pay is driven by production also. They have base pays, but they want to be successful and they want to give great treatments, great results, and also make money. So we look at hourly, like, this room should be generating this amount of revenue per hour based on the provider that's in it today. And that's what we're always looking at. So everyone has, an hourly goal of production based on how they schedule their patients, and a daily goal. And then we kind of, extrapolate that out over weeks, months, and the year.
Yeah, what I love about this is that you almost like an eye care template, but
For
a
sure.
scheduling template for your aesthetic side. So you're
Yes.
treating that not as like a rando, how many patients can come in, what time. It's like you're trying to stack the procedures in a smart way and maximize revenue per hour. So let's talk about some of those revenues. So what do you expect your room to make, or a particular room to make in a day for you, under various circumstances? Just give me some of those numbers.
Sure. So we look at the overall potential. What that I think is completely realistic is that one properly upfit room, depending on how, what your goals are in that room, could easily generate 4,000 a day. And that's, I think, conservative if you have the right treatments and the right staff, and you have the right business philosophy. So, you know, if you want to call it 4,000 in a day, that would be, a goal. I think they can generate far more than that if they're really good at what they do and they have the right devices and the right capabilities.
So how many
So,
rooms do you have?
and we have 4 treatment rooms.
Wow. Okay. So that
Yeah,
there's your upward potential.
that's right.
Um, what's because for anyone keeping score, 200 days in a year, 200 working days in a year, 4,000 a day, that works out to what, 3.2 million a year. Fantastic, right?
Yes, I think
On
that's
the
right.
other side of that, um, let's go back to the revenue per patient question, because I still feel like we need to put our put our thoughts around what some of these numbers look like. And you have a lot of options for them, right? So let's talk about your VIP patient. How much is your VIP patient going to spend with you in a year to accomplish their goals?
$7,000 to $10,000.
Okay, so that is so that's your $7,000 to $10,000 patient, and because they're spending some money on tox, some money on some money on devices, what's your EBITDA or gross margin on that patient?
So a very successful spa can be 30%. And I think as an industry and more, depending on how it's run. And, obviously the more efficiently you run and the larger the size, then that affects all of that. But I think just like in the eye care world, getting into the mid 20s is a really good place for EBITDA.
Yeah, but
In
I think that's overall EBITDA. And I was going to go there next, but you kind of
Oh
beat
yeah,
me to it.
for each
But
patient. Okay.
I'm thinking like I'll compare it
Yes.
to eye care. So
Yeah.
if I have a glasses patient that comes in and spends $400 today, that
Yes.
glasses patient, I'm going to have $133 cost of goods. I'm going to have $200. Or no, sorry, not $200. I'll have $60 or something that I'm contributing to, or maybe $80 that I'm contributing to provider pay. So somewhere in the realm of 40 to 50% clear gross margin, contributing margin from that patient. That's not saying I had to pay the front
Of
desk,
the business.
I
Right.
had to pay the rent, I had to pay whatever business insurance. Forget all that, right?
Yeah.
Just one incremental patient walks in today to fill an empty slot. I made an extra. If my revenue per patient's $400, I made an extra, for simple math, $200 that I put in my pocket from that.
Yeah.
So on
I
that
think
$10,000, $7,000 to $10,000 patient, if you got
yes.
another one today and you didn't have to get more rent, you didn't have to get more staff, whatever, well, you obviously have to pay your staff on production. So what does that cost you to provide those services?
So if you think about it that way, which is a little hard for me to fully think about because I'm thinking about so many other pieces of it and thinking about the business as a whole, which is generally how I think. I mean, I think that you're making a tremendous amount more than the EBITDA of 25 to 30% on that $7,000 to $10,000 patient. It depends on what the combination is that they're doing and what programs they're in. So one could be over 50% of it, because you're combining weight optimization and running an IPL that's maybe paid for in some cases, maybe not, and then also um, 40 units of tox. So depending on the combination of the treatment, that can run up in 40, where your margin is 40 and 50%. Maybe I would have to run all the different scenarios. It can be a very lucrative option. You obviously won't learn long-term patients, because you're walking through the journey with them and they're coming back and doing all the things.
Right. And those are the patients that are most likely to refer. They feel like
Sure.
VIPs, they feel like they're at home. They tell everybody, they buy packages as Christmas gifts for other people. Like those are patients that are super committed. So, and I agree with you that building rather than a price model, rather than a price first model,
Yes.
building the plan and then having patients commit to a plan, which probably requires a separate person to be able to do that, but
Yes.
having patients commit to a plan then ultimately gives you the highest revenue per patient potentiality. And the best part is it's not $7,000 to $10,000; it's $7,000 to $10,000 per year. And
Correct.
I
Correct.
think I don't know. Do you know the aesthetics industry stat on how long a typical patient stays with their provider of choice?
I have not. I don't know that. It's would be fascinating to know. I probably should. I don't. I've not seen an
I
actual
read
national.
6 years ago. I was just looking somewhere around the COVID times. I read that an aesthetics patient is like a 3 point something year journey once they if they like their provider, right? Like
Yes.
if you survey them the first. I think this was on the importance of surveys. If you survey them in the first 6 months and you like just address any need or concern or problem that they had, um, and then if you hyper survey them and you're hypersensitive to their needs, then they'll stick around for 3 point some number of years. So that means that
There you
that
go.
one patient that you said is $7,000 to $10,000 is really $21,000 to $30,000 on the low
Right.
end of that cycle, as long as you continue meeting their needs, which is really really high value for when you think about like what's the
Yeah.
ROI and how do you really build $1 million aesthetics practice. Um, so let's turn to a couple other points. So you mentioned running it like a business, and you
Mhm.
mentioned talking like thinking about like what are the metrics, what are the so you talk about how much money does the room supposed to make me, how much money is each device supposed to make me, how much money is each person supposed to make me. Like, talk me through other metrics that you as a data driven operator are looking at to make sure that this business is moving in the right direction, and maybe take me back 4 or 5 years when you were kind of on the cusp. Like right now, you've obviously created a very successful aesthetics business, but
Yeah.
at some point it was like, I don't know, this thing maybe break even, maybe not so break even, maybe like some months it's doing well, some months it's losing money, some months it's making good money. Like, what are the things that you're looking at when you're on the cusp to determine to like kind of steer the ship as an entrepreneur?
Okay. So yeah, again, years ago, I was on a learning curve myself. So it was like fly by the seat of your pants a little bit. Unfortunately, that's embarrassing to say, but it's just true. So one thing about eye doctors who are running businesses is that you get a business degree running an optometric practice. So you have a lot of knowledge that can be picked up and put into any business model, which is fun. We have more understanding of businesses, P&Ls, cost of goods than so many other people because we're running a medical space and a retail space in one. So I simply picked up the knowledge that I had from eye care and then kind of set that down inside the med spa space. Since then, I use a lot of similar philosophies, but track things a little differently. And every month I'm adding things. So you know, again, when we were talking about numbers, it was running through my mind. Numbers are important and generating that revenue is important, but so many things have to go into place foundationally to make that happen. And that's developing your team, having processes, protocols, looking at things with your teams and training your teams. And that's work. We all know if you own a business, that's work. It's the same. It's work. I'm working with all of our team on these consultations now, and we sit down as a full team now monthly. I sit down with my management weekly and we look at numbers. So we look at leads, for example. Our EHR captures if someone goes to our website and searches something and they go so far, it and then don't book, it's a lead and it'll show us what they looked for. And then we utilize those to go back to those patients and say, we saw you look for this. You know, we start to look at creative ways to how could we capture that person, because we know that if we can capture them once, we're really pretty good at retention. But getting the new patients is always a work in progress. So obviously we want people to have good experiences and tell others, but we want to capture every area of interest. So we look at leads. We also run reports to see, these people have not come in over 6 months. What were the services that they had? And, what could we offer them? The other big piece is, even right now, we're getting ready to buy another laser because I feel like we have a small gap in our services right now. And I know that once people get to a certain point in their own maintenance, we need to make sure that we've hit every gap on aesthetic treatments. And then it becomes a maintenance, maintenance over time. So always look. I don't think it's a one and done. Like I'm going to buy these devices and this is going to be super successful. It's going to be work. And how do you layer the devices? What are the new technologies coming out? And having a strategy all the time. So we're looking at how many of certain devices are run. What can you stack on those devices to get a better outcome? And what patient wouldn't want to have two devices run at one time at a lesser price than paying for both of those separately.
Hmm.
So you're maximized your revenue, but you also maximized their outcome. The per patient revenue was higher, they got a better outcome, and now you can see more patients at a higher dollar amount. That's what we're always looking at, because I think that that's the smart way to use the space and get outcomes.
Yeah, and I love that as like a little tip is that, if you give patients a benefit to do two things versus one at the same time,
Mhm.
that works out
Right.
to, help everybody. Um, Are there any other, like, I'll call them like non-obvious tips that you learned along the way that that are strong contributors to success? Obviously, you're very data driven. That's great. But is there anything that you guys do in the room? Is there any way that you present procedures? Is there anything that you do for your patients that's like a, you know make them feel special type of stuff that ultimately you think has led to your success?
I think there's little things along the way that I have skilled providers that have come in from other locations, and they have always have ideas for adding those special touches, which is an expense, but it makes the whole experience better. So we do all sorts of things like little bags of goodie, a sponge to take home and a sample of the product that we used on the face. So let's just say you did today you did micro needling and IPL, and we think you need a dermal reboot. They will put the dermal reboot product on and then give them, whatever applicator and a small sample bottle size to take home with them. Those little touches, while they add a little bit of expense, they create an experience. So I think that that's really important. I think educating and using visual aids to me is just so important, that your people are knowledgeable. And I'm not saying that mine are all perfectly knowledgeable, nor am I. We're always on a learning curve. And I'm always thinking of like, if you used every one of your devices and you showed the patients, well, the microneedling goes to this depth of the skin layer, the IPL hits this, the ablation, the ablative technology hits here. In their minds, they see, oh, that's why I can't expect tox to make my skin look like Susie's at wherever I am. Well, no. And I think that's an ongoing piece of educating our teams and educating our patients. And then we do little things like we have dark chocolates with our logo on them at checkout. So they all get like a little square of dark chocolate. We have occasionally some events. We're always trying to do just little things that will make the experience more memorable and more personalized. So that's always a work in progress. I'm not perfect at it yet, but the staff always think of ideas and we try to incorporate them, and some are successful and some are not.
Yeah, this is such a because obviously there's like tangible tangible benefit to the business, but it's such a high service, high touch service business that depends so deeply on the experience the patient
For sure.
has. That's what I mean. You totally covered it. As what I was trying to get at is that it's not just about what you do as a procedure. It's how you make the patients feel when they're receiving the procedure or they're walking into your spa. Because the whole point is this is a super high retention business if you do that right, but it's also a really high cost business if you do that wrong. And
That's right.
clearly, you figured it out, so that's why I wanted to touch on that. Um, okay, Amanda, as we wrap up, two mistakes to avoid. Two biggest mistakes to avoid for anybody considering going deeper into their aesthetics business.
One is to buy into the performas that are provided to you directly from reps. Um, I think that, you have to be wise in what you're buying. And I do a business plan on every device. So the reps will gladly give you how you're going to make 500,000 in 1 year. I think that that's a dangerous road to go down, because you must have a protocol in place. You must train your staff. You must have the right appointment links. You have to have the marketing in place, the launch in place, and then a reasonable effort has to be made to roll out anything, and that's work. So, I think that's a misconception. I'm going to buy this device and it's going to make all of this money. Well, it can. There's work that goes into it, and usually those are highly inflated. So I think I've gotten much better at giving pushback and asking questions and developing my own business plans on all the decisions we make.
I love that.
And
Yep.
you're skilled ODs are skilled at that, because you've already done that if you're running a successful practice, um, or a successful business of any sort. So that would be the biggest mistake I think I ran with in the beginning. The aesthetic world is very, very different than the eye care world. When you buy an OCT that it's run like this, you read it like this, and you're going to get reimbursed this amount. And they generally, you're not negotiating on prices. It's very, very
Mhm.
different. Very different.
Got it. And I think, as I'm hearing you say this, a lot of the stuff you kind of figured out on your own, but there is not a huge community of ODs that are successful at aesthetics as an adjacent business. There's a huge community of med spa owners, but they may have a different approach to patient care. They may have a different approach to what's important to them. And, many times med spa owners have different levels of certification or background that ultimately led them to where they are today. And so this community of ODs that are successful with med spas is actually really small, in, at least from what I know. So, I hope that as people get a chance to explore whether this idea makes sense to them, maybe I can share some of your information in the show
Sure.
notes. So if people have questions, maybe they have a chance to reach out to you or something like that.
Sure. Sounds great.
All right,
I'm happy.
Amanda, thank you so much for being on the Power Hour today. It has been an amazing conversation and so eye opening, I think, for me, because as people think about these little adjacencies, and if you want to do it right, and if you actually want it to pay you back, then you really have to think about it as an independent business. And you've done that. And congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.